Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting edition of Community Report on Channels Television. I'm yours truly, Victoria Ido. On the show today, we're looking at interior designs and interior designers. We're looking at the work carried out by these people, the beauty they create in spaces, the colors they use, the palettes and all of these things that they put together to create a beautiful ambience and a beautiful space to be in. Welcome to the show. Have you ever gotten into a space and the look of the entire space catches your attention? Then you wonder how the colors and aesthetics all match so well.
Thinking about colors to pick for a client, you have to figure out what kind of space do you want to create.
These are all put together by professionals known as interior designers. No matter the size, every interior designer works to create a space that is attractive yet functional and safe while meeting the specific needs of the client. An interior designer is typical an independent contractor with certain qualities like good communication skills. Through the use of furniture placements, color palettes, decorations, interior designers create a variety of spaces. From living rooms that are beautiful yet functional, to offices that people would love to work in, elements such as artworks, lightings, window treatments, flooring must work together to contribute to an overall look. To become an interior designer, going through the learning process is key. There are varieties of areas that interior designers can specialize in. For instance, corporate designers create a combination of practical and professional workspace and also try to incorporate elements of a company's brand within their design. They work in varieties of setting, from very small offices and startups to very large corporate buildings. Regardless of the size and scope of the project, their main focus is to create a space that is efficient and functional. 5 years in the industry. Tommy is one of those doing exceedingly well in the industry.
But then I studied computer science, IT. And when I was done in school, because I really wanted to do architecture and I couldn't start another degree in architecture, so I went to study interior design in Italy. So yes, that's how I moved into interior design, because it's something I've always wanted to do.
The statistics of interior designers is not retrievable because it's a relatively new market.
The funny thing is there are actually a lot of people into interior design. Now, do we have a lot of established businesses in interior design? Maybe not as much. But in terms of residential design, I think we have fairly a large market.
Learning to become an interior designer will take more than learning on the job.
Being an interior decorator is the easiest part to follow. For that, you just need to have, say, passion and skill. So you need to maybe know how to put colors together, but you most likely will be limited to doing, say, residential interiors. But if you really want to do interior design, the best route I would advise anyone, like I did, is to study.
Designing a residential space starts from the thought process.
If you want to design your house, that's residential. The first thing you do, like I said, first of all, know what it is you want. It will be easier for your interior designer if you're clear on your style and what you're trying to achieve. Every residential interior is different. It's meant to be suited to the personality of the person living in it. So first of all, know that.
Interior designers cannot work alone.
An interior designer takes charge of pretty much everything that has to do with the interior. An interior decorator does with aesthetics, beauty, maybe not function. And that's where the difference is. So an interior decorator wants to decorate your space. So they're looking at maybe colors and curtains and how it matches. An interior designer does what a decorator will do, but does way more than that.
It's important to start early. An early year means design stage with the architect.
The best is when you know you want to build, call an interior designer. Once you have like an approval for the building, call an interior designer to talk with your architect and then finalize what it is you want to do. If, for example, you already have an existing building, an interior designer can still work on it. So they can work with the current structure and make some changes, right? So there might be some slightly civil aspects to it. So for example, they might need to maybe break some walls or chip some spaces to just make sure it's good. But you can still also use an interior designer even though you have a complete space.
Knowledge in basic things like woodwork is essential skill needed by an interior designer.
So in design school, for example, you take a course on furniture design. So it teaches you about furniture, how to make furniture, maybe not how to make furniture, not woodwork, but in terms of how to design furniture, how to pick materials. Because in some spaces, so this is residential, so residential is pretty easy. But if you're going to commercial, which is what we do mainly, you might need to design things that are very unique, that you probably haven't seen before. So you have to think about how do you actually design that furniture. You have to actually create a new furniture that maybe nobody has ever seen.
The location where we are is a residential space with a tint of blue, yellow and grey.
This residential space is for one of Nigeria's gospel artists, and what they wanted was a space that reflected them. And so it's really not even what was on our mind, but what the client was trying to achieve.
White walls have become very popular in most homes, and this is why.
The reason why a lot of people do white walls is because white is a very good background for design. When I say good background for design, it's like interior design or designing a space is like painting. So when you want to paint, for example, it's best to start with a white canvas, right? You don't start with a very busy canvas and then you start putting layering on it, because designing and decoration takes a lot of layers, and your first layer is your wall. So for example, if your wall is busy, it will be difficult to put anything on top of it.
Before now, most people use strong primary colours, but that trend seemed to have fizzled out.
It was popular, right? But it's not necessarily good design. So there's something also that as designers we have to be careful of, and people have to also know that, and that's trends. So something can be trendy, but doesn't mean it's good design. So because it's popular and trendy doesn't mean it's good design. And then, yes, I grew up seeing things like that where you have like yellow walls and grey walls. And when I first started in design school, interestingly, my first design was pretty close to that. And I remember getting lashed for that. I remember going back to my room and crying because it was in front of the whole class, because you have to present your design. And then they explained why it can't be like that. Now you can work with it, it's possible. So for example, in a commercial space, if you're doing a tech space, for example, where you're trying to create this young, vibrant feel.
Some colours have a way of affecting the mood of a person, which is why white is a go-to colour for most people.
There's something they also call color psychology, that the color and the space affects your mood. So you don't want your clients waking up every morning and being very angry. Imagine painting someone's room in red. They'll wake up every day and be very angry. They'll just be angry and having IBP for no reason, not knowing that it's because of their room is painted in red, or they wake up and they see a red wall. So you have to also be very careful. White is peaceful.
Colours make a space beautiful. Knowing how to use and combine the colours is key.
The key thing when you're working with colors is you have 4 walls. All the 4 walls don't have to be the same color, right? That's another thing you have to realize. In some spaces, you can have all the 4 walls be in that color. So for example, if you're doing like a man cave and you need it to be very dark and manly and have this this feel, I'm trying to look for the right word, you could use some colors in all of the spaces, but it's just one space I use once in a while and trying to evoke that mood.
Let's talk throw pillows and the beauty they bring to the space.
Navy blue, gold, and a shade of yellow, right? And then grey. So you know these are the colors we're following, or we're working with, and then every other thing goes with that. So you can either have like shades and tints of that particular color. So the throw pillow has to go in that line. So for example, you won't see me using a red throw pillow in this space.
For a client without ideas, answering questions from the interior designer is the way.
The designer isn't going to ask you what type of drapes do you like. What they'll ask you is, Are you a curtain or a blinds person? What are you trying to achieve? What style are you? Are you trying to do maybe a contemporary style, a minimalist style, for example? So there are different kinds of design styles. If your designer understands what your design style is, then they can better advise on what you should use.
Curtains and drapes must blend with the color scheme.
Basically, it was simple. We already have a color scheme we're going with, so we had to pick a curtain within the color scheme. In terms of style of sewing the drapes, we decided to just go with a 3-pleat. Basically, it's nothing over the block. For example, you could have it in rings, and then you have, yeah. So it really depends.
In a residential space, it's important to start first with the couch.
So usually what we start with is the major furniture. So this one, it's the first thing we start with. We already know with the scheme. So if you have grey chairs, you know that you don't want to also do grey dining because of proximity. So you want to have a contrast between this and this, right? So definitely you know this is going to be a different color. What is the other color in your scheme? So for example, we have yellow and then we have blue. Since we don't want to have grey, we think do want to have yellow dining chairs. Yellow dining chairs means it will take more to maintain. So we can have yellow dining chairs.
Let's feed our eyes with some of the beauty right here. And let's meet Folake Oloye. We had our interview in this space, but first we had to create it. Hanging of the frame comes first. Then we move the console underneath the picture frame. Everyone's hand is on deck, taking instruction from the interior designer. And as we style the console, we start with the rule of 3.
One of the things about styling a console is it's always better off to start with the big one in the middle. So whatever is the widest, the tallest, that's what you start out with. And so I'll be starting with this vase. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. So we start in the middle, and then from the middle we start building out, right? You can now decide to say, okay, do I want to go? Usually I prefer to use the rule of 3s when it comes to styling a console. So you could do, or I use 3s, but it's okay to also use odd numbers. What's important is not to use even numbers, because even numbers have a way of not giving you that nice tiered look. But if you do odds, so you do 3s, 5s, any of those, but I like 3s, so I use the rule of 3s when I'm styling a console. I'll start with my big one, and then I will look at it and say, okay, how do I want to complement this? One of the things I would look at is, what are the things that are peeping out on this console? So I see pips of gold, and there's gold on the frame. So I'll probably introduce a little bit more gold items to make it look extra nice.
And it's time to layer.
So these are magazines that we just have in our offices, and we just picked up a few, but I'm not going to use all of them because I think the stack is going to be too high. So I'm going to stack fewer. So I'll do this. And that's one of the things I always say, like, you don't necessarily need to buy, a lot of times some people want to buy false books to do their styling, but it's not necessary. If you have a nice book at home, and the prettier the better. Unfortunately, we have just black books.
Let's try a second look.
And then we'll now start with style number 2. Style number 2, we're going to be doing lamps now. So let's do the lamp. Thank you. So like I said, always start out with your taller items. How does that look? Do you like it? It's okay.
And finally, she creates a third and final look.
Style number 3, should we call it Africa?
Consoles are usually used as sideboards and have several functions.
And one of the beautiful things about consoles or sideboards, and they're called all sorts of names, so you will hear people say console, credenza, sideboards. The beautiful thing about them is, as much as they're good for making things pretty, They're good storage, good for storage, and they're also good for collecting things. So that's why you see a lot of people have it in the entrance of their houses. So things like keys, you can always make sure that, you know, that's your place for dropping them off.
Before the interview starts, we try to rearrange the shelf. And after all of the work done, we sit for our interview. The interior design industry, although may not be very popular, it's lucrative and very interesting.
I think the business terrain is very interesting. I think it's one of those things, I heard somewhere where someone said there are 700 plots, empty plots of land between Lekki and, was it third or fourth roundabout? And for me, those are statistics and data that one can use to sort of like drive. Obviously, you also need to check in terms of what people's income and all whatnot.
Getting into the industry for a new entrant, he needs to identify where his interest lies.
I think as a newbie getting into the industry, first and foremost, try and find the things that you gravitate towards. So are you more inclined to do a residential space? Are you more inclined to do a commercial space? You know, whatever space that you're inclined towards, I think you should find that one and then now start building around it.
At what point do you think you need an interior designer? I ask.
A lot of times people say, oh, we don't want to incur the first cost. But the truth is, it's cheaper for you in the long run. So get the interior designer on board to say, this is the vision. We're hiring this much. These are our growth plans. This is this is that. You know, in 2 years, in 3 years, these are expansions. And that designer will sit back and then draw out something that will also be futuristic.
Some do's and don'ts for an interior designer.
I will say the do's and don'ts for me as an interior designer is number one, being too matchy. Like in terms of making sure that, you know, a lot of times what happens is you get clients that are like, oh, I like gold. And then everywhere is like gold dust. Gold is everywhere. I would say pick one element and then you can then revolve around it, but do not do matchy-matchy.
Commercial spaces like this, each section has a touch of beauty and functionality.
For us, what we did was to say, okay, you know what, we were going to section it. We wanted to have downstairs as more of training, and then that would be like reception area, an experience space, an experience center. All of that was going downstairs, and then upstairs was now the office. And so we focused on everything training downstairs, and then we moved upstairs and then had the other two companies represented there.
As an industry, there are some of these basic challenges faced.
We don't have that workforce that is as trained as you will find abroad. And so what that means is that it takes a lot to just execute something that would be really simple because you're breaking it down. And then when you find the ones that are very good, there are not many of them. So at the end of the day, you have overloaded one person because this person is able to execute as you think it through.
The role of an interior designer was more evident during the recent lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And yes, there is a huge market for interior designers.
It may require interior designers selling it, but I realized that, you know, the more people are evolving, the more entrepreneurs that are coming into the workspace, the more people are exposed and traveling and all of that, they're realizing that the quality of life could be a lot better. And that's what interior design does for you.
And this is where the government comes in.
I feel that the more that the government can help is in allowing and celebrating skilled workers. So much so that if I have a passion for carpentry, I can graduate and just work in carpentry. I can actually just study carpentry as a course. And that way we then start developing our skilled men.
This is another commercial space in the heart of Lagos put together by Banke.
Good to have you here. I'm good. thank you for coming to visit one of our client spaces.
First, I ask what it takes to manage an interior design business in Nigeria with all the attendant challenges.
Doing interior design is could be challenging, especially if you don't understand the fundamentals of it. So that's aesthetic, balance with functionality, without, depriving either of this to basic.
She takes us around the space.
Because of the kind of flow we're looking to achieve with the space, we wanted
Functionality and efficiency is key when designing a commercial space.
Coming from where they were before, they wanted a lot of space. So they were in this co-working space, also in VI, and they decided they needed like a larger space for when their colleagues come from out of town, right? They have just about 16 people who work in Lagos regularly, but they wanted a space that could accommodate more than that.
She talks about the choice of woods, light fittings, floor mats, and more.
We chose the wooden floor treatment type because apart from the aesthetics, it also absorbs sound. It kind of brings together everything we've put in the space. That's the furnishings, and it's an element of design that's very, that kind of makes the space what it is, right?
Sometimes it could just be that the paint color they've used for that particular space.
Interior designers need to be trained. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, there are not so many schools that serve this purpose.
To understand that, then you can be able to interpret how a space will look like.
We meet students at this institute learning
so
the
take, for
elements of
example,
interior
if you're
design.
going to do a kid's bed-
A family house with little children, what kind of color can we consider?
Jennifer Chukwujekwe started 8 years ago. Today, she has a school where she teaches up-and-coming designers.
It started out like a hobby. It was something I was just doing. It's something I just loved doing. I just loved decorating my own space. Until I just had people come around and like, I like your space. As in, this is what you do for a living. And I'm like, no. And that's when the awakening came up. As in, I can actually do this as a business. So I went into trying to find out how to start it as a business, what to do, and all that.
Although interior designing is not widespread, the reception of people who would like to learn is quite impressive.
When we first started, I would never forget, as in when we did like a online form kind of thing, we had over like 400 people actually sign up. So that was definitely a pointer that people were actually looking for where to study. Yeah. And so far so good. I would say the growth has been fantastic.
Let's talk color combination.
Okay, so today we're talking about color. So color psychology, like we all know, is how it affects, so how color affects human beings and the way they behave and all that, okay? So when you're working with a client and you're thinking about colors to pick for a client, you have to figure out what kind of space do you want to create. So from the brief, when they're telling you things like, I want a warm space, I want a relaxing space, that would determine the kind of colors you pick.
Trying to design a children's room, there is a need to play with a lot of primary colors.
For kids, if you're trying to do like a kids decor, definitely, you have to play with lots of primary colors because kids like colors anyway. So we have to play with lots of colors. And then definitely it depends on the age of the child. So you might think of things in terms of beddings, things that would attract them.
Oluwadamilare Bolaji is a fresh graduate from this institute. And yes, he has high hopes.
I built my interests in everything that has to do with space. Designing the space, putting things to the right place they should be. So from there, I think I developed the interest in studying more about interior designing.
If you have the passion, it's just 20%. 80% is business skills. And if you cannot run a successful interior design business, you're wasting your time. So for some of you here, my advice to you would be to go and get a job to at least get formal or get the hang of it before you start. However, there's some of you that can actually start an interior design business as in like now and everything. So you have to understand that this business is one that has so many things. So what I mean by so many things, it has so many professions in one. You're a psychologist, you're a therapist, you're a project manager, you're an accountant, you're a marketer, you're everything, especially when you're starting out. You cannot afford to begin to hire consultants or hire an interior designer. So once you understand the fact that that is what you are as a person now, then you need to have all the skills, negotiation, marketing, communication, all the skills that you need to run a successful interior design business.
And yes, that's our focus on the show today. Thank you so much for watching. If you missed any part of it, you can check it on our YouTube channel. You can also send your comments to the social media handles showing on your screen. So if you want to become an interior designer, first, You have to learn, 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 and learn. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Victoria Ido. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.